Dear students, this session begins from page number 30. And this session begins with a question. What is it? Should all criticism then be self-effacing and analytic? Self-effacing. What is the meaning of self-effacing? You can take page number 36. There the meaning is given. Self-effacing means to wipe out, erase traces of self-subjectivity. So in the previous session we were talking about the two popular tests. So those two popular tests, they are concerned with the subjectivity of either the author or the reader. So what is the question here? Should all criticism then be self-effacing and analytic? Then do we have to reject all kind of subjectivity when we critically analyze a text? So that is the question here. And what is the answer given by Cleanth? We'll see to it. I hope that the answer is implicit in what I have already written, but I shall go on to spell it out. Of course not. So critical analysis doesn't fully mean the self-effacement of the author or the reader. Of course not. That is how Cleanth spells it out. That will depend upon the occasion and the audience. That is the explanation given by him. In practice, the critic's job is rarely a purely critical one. He is much more likely to be involved in dozens of more or less related tasks. Some of them trivial, some of them important. Now, slowly, Brooks is trying to explain the role of the critic. What is the real role of the critic? Or what are the different processes involved in criticizing a work of art? He says, he is much more, he here refers to the critic. He is much more likely to be involved in dozens of more or less related tasks. A critic is involved in a lot of tasks. Sometimes 1, 2, 3 or even up to dozens of tasks he is involved in while he criticizes a work of art. Some of them trivial, very silly. Trivial means silly. Some of the tasks are very silly, some of them important. He may be trying to get a hearing for a new author or to get the attention of the fresh man sitting in the back row. So the range of tasks, it begins from a new author, hearing, making a new author heard, to get the attention of the freshman. What is the meaning of freshman? A first year student in college like you. Getting the attention of a first year student in a college. So that means a critic has to think in his mind about an ordinary reader and also about an intellectual new author also. So the tasks involved in the process of criticizing a work of art, it is related to the different spectrum of reading activities. He may be comparing two authors or editing a text, writing a brief newspaper review, or reading a paper before the Modern Language Association. These all are the possible tasks done by a critic. He may even be simply talking with a friend, talking about literature for the hell of it. Parable, anecdote, epigram, metaphor, these and 100 other devices may be thoroughly legitimate for his varying purposes. So I told you, a critic is involved in a lot of tasks. Some of them are trivial tasks, silly tasks. Some of them are very important tasks. And his action or a simple talk of a critic with one of his friends, or talking about literature, or using different parables or epigrams or anecdotes or even metaphors to talk about literature to others. All these are involved in the different tasks of a critic. Because he is doing all these things with a purpose in his mind. If he is relating a work to his friend, he has a purpose in his mind to get the opinion of the friend, or how the friend receives that text, or what is the perspective of his friend. Another task is he giving an interview, or he writing a column about this particular work in a newspaper. And there he is addressing a general public, the mass, and he is keenly observing the responses made by the mass. So he has another purpose there. So these are the roles or tasks in which a critic is involved. He is certainly not to be asked to suppress his personal enthusiasms or his interest in social history or in politics. So we had begun this session with a question. Is criticism altogether a process of self-effacing? Should the critic forget in total about his own personality or subjectivity? And he says, of course not. Because he is involved in a lot of tasks in the process of criticizing. And his personality or his personal enthusiasms or interest in the social history or in politics are all connected with these simple tasks that he does in the process of criticizing. So he cannot fully avoid his own subjectivity from the process of criticizing. Least of all is his being asked to present his criticisms as the close reading of a text. So the concept of close reading is a very important thing to the formalists. Close reading means we are concentrating on the text, the structure, the words, the style, and trying to understand the content of the text. Tact, common sense, and uncommon sense, if he has it, are all requisite if the practicing critic is to do his various job as well. So the common sense, and Brooks says if there is anything called uncommon sense, everything, tact, everything is needed if a critic has to do the various jobs or the various tasks assigned to him. It involves dozens of tasks, the process of criticizing. Now we move on to the next paragraph in this page. But it will do the critic no harm to have a clear idea of what his specific job as a critic is. I can sympathize with writers who are tired of reading rather drab critical analysis and who recommend brighter, more amateur and more human criticism. As ideals, these are excellent. As recipes for improving criticism, I have my doubts. So here, Brooks is talking about the role of the critic. He is explaining it further. How does an author value a critic? An author is always a little bit confused to read the article of a critic. Many a time he is not so comfortable to read a critic, because for an author, criticism sometimes seems as drab critical analysis. What is the meaning of drab? It is there in page number 36. Drab means dry, uninteresting and boring. So there is a tendency in the mind of the authors to avoid such boring or uninteresting or dry criticism made by the critics. Instead of that, they will move on to some brighter, more amateur and more human criticism. What is the meaning of it? So avoiding the dry criticism by the traditional critics, there is a tendency among the authors to concentrate more on the budding critics, the amateur critics. And they have a justification also. The authors say that we have to concentrate more on the amateur critics because they speak more in relation with humanity and the connection of the text with humanity. But Brooks says that is not a very positive sign from the part of the author. As ideals, these are excellent. As recipes for improving criticism, I have my doubts. Appropriate vulgarizations of these ideals are already flourishing and have long flourished in the classroom presided over by a college lecturer of infectious enthusiasm, in a gossipy Book of the Month club bulletins, and in the columns of Saturday Review of Literature. So here Brooks says that amateur criticism, it is very popular, and it happens usually in college classrooms or in some journals. Saturday Review of Literature, what is it? An American weekly magazine. So there are some magazines that promote amateur literary criticism. So by reading all those magazines or such columns in newspapers, or merely depending upon the amateur criticism that is formed in a college classroom, an author cannot develop his work of art, or a critic cannot proceed with developing his capability of criticizing a work of art. If he has to develop his process, he has to rely upon the real criticism made by an authentic critic. I am going to the next paragraph. I have assigned the critic a modest, though I think an important role. So it is in this paragraph Brooks is talking about the role of the critic. With reference to the help which the critic can give to the practicing artist, the role is even more modest. As a critic, he can give only negative help. So in this paragraph, Brooks is talking about the influence of critic upon an artist or upon an author. There are two types of influences: negative influences and positive influences. So first he talks about negative help. As a critic, he can give only negative help. Literature is not written by formula. He can have no formula to offer. We cannot say an author. A critic cannot go to an author and tell him that you have to write your work of art in this formula. He cannot say like that. Perhaps he can do little more than indicate whether, in his opinion, the work has succeeded or failed. A critic can only state that. In his opinion, in the critic's opinion, whether the work has succeeded or failed, he can only tell that. Healthy criticism and healthy creation do tend to go hand in hand. Very important, underline that. So criticism should always be healthy. Only then there will be healthy creation also. Everything else being equal, the creative artist is better off for being in touch with a vigorous criticism. But the other considerations are never equal. The case is always special. And in a given case, the proper advice could be quit reading criticism altogether, or read political science or history or philosophy, or join the army or join the church. So, in this paragraph, Brooks is talking about the effect of the negative help some critics give to the artist or the author. So that is very pathetic. A critic should not give negative comments to the author, or he should not make negative comments only about a work of art. So it will just make the author leave his profession and do something else. Okay. Quit reading criticism altogether, or read political science or history or philosophy, or join army or join the church. In the next paragraph, Brooks is talking about the positive help a critic can do. And that is what the modest role of a critic is. So the next paragraph. There is certainly no doubt that the kind of specific and positive help, underline specific and positive help, that someone like Ezra Pound was able to give to several writers of our time is in one sense the most important kind of criticism that there can be. So he is giving us an example of an author. What is his name? Ezra Pound. Who is Ezra Pound? Yes, look at note number 11 in the bottom of the page. Ezra Pound, 1885 to 1972. He was an American modernist poet and critic. He is the author of The Cantos. He deftly edited T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, which Eliot acknowledged by calling him the greater craftsman. So, who is Ezra Pound? Ezra Pound is an American writer, an American poet, an American critic. Ezra Pound had given a positive help to many modern authors. And one such example is described here in the notes. The positive help that he had given to T.S. Eliot, the greatest poet of the modern age. One of the greatest works written by T.S. Eliot is The Wasteland. Ezra Pound, the critic, he went through that material, The Wasteland, and he made some corrections before its publication. And T.S. Eliot accepted that correction by this critic. And T.S. Eliot calls Ezra Pound as the greater craftsman too. So the way Ezra Pound criticized T.S. Eliot's Wasteland is an example for the positive help a critic can give to an artist or to an author. It is to that instance Cleanth is pointing to here. There is certainly no doubt that the kind of specific and positive help that someone like Ezra Pound was able to give to several writers of our time is, in one sense, the most important kind of criticism that there can be. Underline those sentences. I think that it is not unrelated to the kind of criticism that I have described. There is the same intense concern with the text which is being built up. The same concern with technical problems. But many other things are involved. Matters which lie outside the specific ambit of criticism altogether. Among them, a knowledge of the personality of the particular writer, the ability to stimulate, to make positive suggestions. So what is the meaning of ambit? Ambit, page number 36. Ambit means boundary or limit. So giving us the example of Ezra Pound, Cleanth talks to us more about the role of a critic. The critic's main concern is the text, not the author or the personality of the author. The same intense concern with the text, underline that, which is being built up. The text is getting built up. The same concern with technical problems. The critic's concern is with the text, with the technical problems in the text. His concern is not with the personality of the creator of the text or the author of the text. But there are many matters also involved in the production or in the composition of a text. And in those many matters, a lot of things include, like a knowledge of the personality of the particular writer, the ability to stimulate, to make positive suggestions. So, I am winding up this session here. And what have we discussed in this session? In this session, Cleanth talks about the role of a critic, the negative help and also about the positive help. He is giving us the example of Ezra Pound. And he is underlining the fact that the role of the critic is just to read the text close. He is emphasizing the factor of close reading of the text. Analyze the technical aspects of the text. Concentrate on the intense concern with the text. All other factors related either to the author or to the reader or to the history or to the biography, everything, they are all insignificant to the formalist critic. With this, I wind up this session. We will be continuing our lesson in the next sessions. Thank you for this time.